as part of the inaugural event of Art Next, which is a wonderful new foundation supporting the emergence of young artists throughout India. This is the first, you're experiencing the first in what we think will be an annual symposium devoted to discussing issues in contemporary art and introducing ideas by practicing artists from around the world into the community of emerging artists in India. To discuss from a variety of perspectives that we represent here, ideas that we think are central to the discussion that is another word for the art world. I mean, if you think of the art world as a conversation that is taking place among and between artists and people who look at and think about art, then all of our jobs is really either taking part in or helping to interpret that conversation for the benefit of others and for the benefit of our own feeble attempt to understand what is a very complex and completely and always completely changing conversation, and changing both in terms of the style of the conversation and also the content of what is being talked about and by whom and in whose interest. And so, to begin with, I thought we would all introduce ourselves and place ourselves a little bit in context for you all, so you understand who we are. And then I will ruthlessly interrogate the panelists until they beg to be excused. So, to begin with, my name is David Ross, and I'm a recovering museum director. You're supposed to all say, "Hi, David."
Hi, David.
Hi. It's been 10 years since I've been outside of museums, and I'm feeling much better. But for 30 years, I worked in art museums in the United States, in Boston and San Francisco and Los Angeles and New York, and had the pleasure of directing several major museums, including the Whitney Museum of American Art, and San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston. Now I work at the School of Visual Arts in New York, where I've realized that over all this time I would have had much more fun working with young artists directly as both a teacher and a department chairman in a graduate program. So I live and work in New York still, and primarily now both work at the School of Visual Arts, and I do some writing and independent curatorial work here and there when the mood suits me. And I've become, I would say, rather critical of the museum community in many ways. And it's a criticism that I feel comfortable expressing these days, since I find myself complicit in many ways for the sorry state of museums around the world. And again, that's a topic we can talk about further. So, Adam?
Hello.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Adam. I'm a writer and an occasional curator. I actually came to art from other fields, and that still is very much in my work, in the sense that I do a lot of projects that would not necessarily be defined as art, and often are done in other sort of networks that involve working with anthropologists, sociologists, economists, things like that, and expanding a lot of the discourse, since a lot of artists actually look at a lot of research-based practice, where a lot of artwork now is based on ecology, based on physics, etc. I just go to the physicists often. In addition to that, I do a lot of work around art, and I've curated a number of shows. I've done a lot of things around architecture and urban planning as well, and I'm currently working on public programs, which is everything from lectures to films to performances, etc., for Documenta, which is a exhibition that takes place normally in Kassel, Germany, about every 5 years since 1955.
I'm Daniel Kunitz. I'm the editor-in-chief of a contemporary art magazine called Modern Painters. It has little to do with painting, because there's not that much painting. Or I'd say that we're constantly being asked about the title, and it's an inherited title from Ruskin, John Ruskin. But it's a contemporary art magazine that covers everything, not just painting. I also write about art for both for my magazine and many others. And that's about it.
I'm Anirudh Chari. I write on art and am an occasional curator. I write for a few journals in India. My curatorial interests I've come from a background in history, so my curatorial projects tend to look at ideas in a specific historical context. And I also lecture at a couple of public institutions in Calcutta where I live and work.
Great. So my first question for the panel is a kind of a leading one, and that is from your various perspectives. How would you define the job that an artist has today? What is the job of an artist? So we'll start with you, Daniel, since you're in the middle here.
That is a very tough question.
I mean, I think many of the young artists in the audience wonder,
Yeah.
you know, now they're out of school, now they are setting out on their own to be artists. What's their job?
Yeah, it's truly multifaceted, it seems, from my perspective, because artists are both making art, and we can go into in depth what that may mean, but you're also selling yourself and art. You are doing studio visits, for instance, where people like me come by and you are explaining your work to the world. You're trying to convince curators to show your work. And frankly, that seems to be a big chunk of one's time as an artist. You know, obviously you're making a lot of work, but I think artists spend a lot of time talking about their work too, as we saw today. And that's not necessarily selling in the sense of trying to get somebody to buy it, but communicating it, trying to put it across. So I think the job of an artist today, and then it's increasingly public appearances. I mean, bizarrely enough, at art fairs, for instance.
So being a public persona?
Yeah, playing an artist in public, on TV. Literally on TV at this point now, right? I mean, being an artist is certainly not just sitting there making work and thinking. It's also increasingly writing about work. I mean, so many artists today are writing about other artists' work, or writing about their own work, or writing theory. They are getting involved in all kinds of extra artistic activities and sort of playing artists in those roles. So, just like if we were to sit here and try and define what making art is today, I think we would agree that category has blurred out into something that's almost indefinable. I would say being an artist today has blurred out into something that is much broader than simply the making art. Would you all agree with that?
Would you agree that?
I would largely agree with that. I would largely agree with that. But I also think one of the things that artists have to do.
The job of being an artist.
The job of being an
We're
artist.
writing a job description now for an ad we're going to place.
Make yourself
in
heard.
Modern Painters.
Make yourself heard.
Make yourself heard.
Yeah.
That's the job.
That's the job. You need to put your voice out there. You need to articulate certain basic ideas and concepts. And in the process of articulating those ideas and concepts, you're also articulating some sense of what it is to be you, what it is to be the artist. And if you're able to successfully convey that, both to the viewing public and what has come to be an increasingly major player that is the market, you've successfully accomplished what you set out to do.
Although it sounds curiously like being a politician would be the same thing as being, the art of the possible, or would be the job of being an artist too, making yourself heard. That's what politicians do. I mean, how do we differentiate that? But still, let's go to Adam. How would you define for your generation, of artists coming of age? You're in your early 30s. What the job is?
Well, it's interesting because we've been floating around different definitions of the word job. On the one hand, we've been talking about job as in vocation and practicalities of it, as means of support. And on the other hand, we've been talking about job in the ethical sense as what is your role, what is your purpose. I won't say which one is good and which are necessary, but these are the two poles you operate between. And I guess what really lies therein is how do those interact and what kind of compromises are dependent on both. Wherein, yes, you can be a politician and you can make your voice heard because you think your idea is important, but that might not be necessary. You know, if your goal is not popularity, then you don't have to participate in this at all.
But if your goal is change, if you're an artist following the path perhaps set out by someone like Joseph Beuys,
right,
and you see yourself as an agent of change, but working within the notions of the sublime, then how do you turn that into an actual work? You know, we throw the word practice around, and that being an artist includes the evolution of a practice. Well, that implies some actual work, that you're doing work. You are a worker, a cultural worker. So what is that work that you do as a cultural worker that's at all relevant in this day and age? What does that work consist of? Making more pictures? Making fewer pictures? Helping other people sort through all the images and ideas that are out there? What constitutes this job? I think it's a very confusing time to be an artist. Susan, you have to...
Because I'm an artist, and I think that nowadays it's too much that students, while they are still studying, think about these structures, what you just said, you have to do this, you have to do this. It's like, which points do I have to make to be successful? And I think you don't have to do it at all, because if you are an artist, it's great to have freedom and to develop your own structure. And if it's strong, you can build up your own structure, which is not following all these what you just said.
I think
that's why I'm an artist, because I don't want, then I can do another job, you know.
Yeah, I agree, but those freedoms are largely being restricted to a certain extent. And there are lots of factors coming in which are restricting those freedoms. And I think artists need to now negotiate those factors as well. And it's because those restrictions are playing very much on their minds that they need to bear all these questions in mind in order to plan what the next move might be, which is not necessarily what you would do in an ideal situation, which is you just have the freedom to produce and engage in your practice and need to build up your practice.
But I think it's too early as a student if you think about all this already before you even do any work which has a really strong
significance. Yes.
But you can't work totally intuitively. I mean, let's since you're all engaged in so many other ways of approaching art from various points of view, various intellectual disciplines. I mean, let's step back a bit and see when did these changes come about that are so confusing. I mean, to use an overused word, this paradigm that we're living in right now is when did this really begin to shift? Because if we think about the role of an artist, let's say in 1830,